We're going to run through the game management guidelines. Rugby Ontario and Rugby Canada do not have game management guidelines. So what we've done for this meeting is we've pulled up ones from Australia. We've used in the past, and if you've all had a chance to read them, some of the terminology is a little different than what we know. And the other thing that I want to emphasize is it's for community level rugby. It's not what we see on TV, folks.
Big thing with Scrum is obviously safety. This is the one piece of the entire game that we can control. And the big key, if you get nothing else from this, is safety. So if you don't like something, blow it up and just start again. There's no need to force something that doesn't look good. So the Scrum cadence, which hasn't changed in a couple of years, just remember it's 3 specific calls, and we want 3 specific results at each call. There's no, when you hear people ask they want a specific cadence or whatever, the answer is no. The answer is we'll move on to the next call when I'm happy with the first one. And stability, there's no rush, and stability is the other big issue. You want to make sure that you're stable before moving on to the next call. So crouch, the first one, obviously, what we're looking for is basically your front row is their backs are straight, they're supporting their weight, you know, they're in a strong position. And again, there's always a pause between each call to make things settle down. Bind, what you're looking for here, same thing, you want stability, you know, backs are straight, binding on the back or the side, not on the arm. That will keep the scrum up. And ideally, you want a bit of a gap, ideally. I'm going to be honest, at the lower end, if you get them to stand up, that's pretty good. And from distance-wise, you're looking, you know, ear to ear. You still want a bit of a gap, but you want them close enough that there's not a big hit. And then set, they're going to come together, and you want to hold until there's stability. So no hit and chase. There's no, feet shouldn't really be moving beforehand. And now that new this year for the scrum feeds, referees are no longer in control of when the ball goes in. We're putting that up to the 9. But what we are saying is that as soon as it's stable, they need to put it in. And once they presented the ball, so kind of once they've sort of got in that crouch position with the ball near the scrum, the ball goes in. Otherwise, free kick them for not putting the ball in. What else do I got here? So there is a new focus on making sure that the ball is fed in straight. However, the scrum half can line up their shoulder, basically their left shoulder, with their prop shoulder. So if they don't put it in straight, they're feeding it directly to the second rows now, and we should hit that. But otherwise, they can line up, so they're feeding it onto their side of the scrum. And also, someone from the front row must strike the ball. So if you have a situation where the ball is sitting there, just sitting in the middle of the scrum, then the answer is free kick to the other team. Somebody's got the ball. There's no reason for the ball to sit in the tunnel anymore. So if it's sitting there, it's because there probably wasn't a strike or a decent strike, and we want to get the game moving. So free kick, and they'll figure it out the next one. The other little bits here. This has been a few years. Scrum goes through 90 is no longer turnover. Advantage, they're saying it's okay to play advantage provided it's safe. We had all had the front row slip, everything's safe, the ball's at the ground, let's just get the ball out and get it away. And then uncontested scrums now have to have 8 people in them. Everybody, both sides required to have 8 people into the uncontested scrums. And the number 8 can reach into basically the second rows and pick the ball up. But once they've done that, the ball's got to come out. They can't reach in, pick it up, set it at their feet, and wait for the 9 to play it. Basically, they're reaching in for it, they're going to play it. And I think that's all the bits I have for scrums at this moment.
Any questions by anybody? I didn't see anything come up on the chats. Straightforward stuff.
I put one in about the front rows resting their heads on the shoulders of their opposition. You see that on TV. I just wondered if, and I know you said it's not TV, but at bind, that rather than staying apart, they're actually resting their forehead on the opposition's shoulder. Any problems with that?
In a perfect world, there should be a space. The reality is, especially at the lower level, I'm finding maintaining that gap is pretty tough to do, but that should always be our goal. Our goal should be to have a gap there, but to be honest, I don't get them very often at the lower end anyways.
I had a question. Sorry. I had a question about like positioning, like as the referee positioning. Obviously, so I guess now we just need to tell the scrum halves before the game or at the first scrum that we won't be, tapping them on the shoulder or giving them a nod or anything anymore. But like positioning wise, do you think we should be standing sort of where the 9 would be feeding it in? Would like then right after the cadences, then step away, and then that's their time. That's sort of their cue to then be able to have that cue to feed the ball in.
I would think when we had it last year, I would suggest you don't change much in positioning because your checklist is still the same at the scrum. It's just we're no longer involved in getting it to the next step where the scrum half feeds the ball in. So have a chat with your scrum half. My suggestion, which we were doing in the fall when we used some of the new laws, bring the scrum half in when you do your scrum chat, and then he or she can have a chat about how the game's going to proceed. But you don't want to wait till the first scrum to have that conversation. Anybody who's played front row that first scrum, they want to get at it. So just involve your scrum half as much as you can and make sure they understand that when you're happy on set, it's up to he or she to put the ball in.
Brian, also where you stand depends on other things that are happening in the scrum as well. If you're having a problem on the other side, you might want to stand on the other side as well. And I never like to take the tunnel away from the scrum half, so I don't like to stand in the tunnel unless I'm having a problem there.
Yeah, correct. You should. I've always gone with it. I'll tell the scrum half I'm going to give them my hip, and I'm backing away once we're set anyway. And then you're just going to move around depending on, like Jeff said, whatever problems you may or may not encounter throughout the game. Your focus is still on everything being set before we get to the putting in of the ball anyways, so that shouldn't change.
What I noticed from the fall, there weren't that many scrums that were lost, but I am curious about when a scrum is being lost now, the 8-man reaching in between the second row's legs and grabbing that ball. I mean, that's the only situation where I would think they would go to take it, is if they're losing. But in the fall, once again, I didn't see it was university ball, but I saw very few scrums being destroyed or sent backwards. Did anybody see that in the fall and see 8 men picking up the ball?
Yeah, I saw it a little bit when they're under pressure, but for us as referees, we got to remember that the purpose of a scrum is to restart the game and not to get all kinds of technicalities. So if an 8-man reaches in now between the second row, when the ball has obviously been layered one set from first row to second row, I say, play on and let them get the game moving.
Yeah, exactly. So that's when they do that when they're losing. They obviously, they're not going to do that unless they're losing the scrum.
Yeah, they're not often. I wouldn't suggest from a coaching perspective, you're going to tell your 8-man to reach in often when you're winning, because then as soon as he does or she does, scrum's over, and flankers and an aggressive 9 will be all over them.
Yeah.
But good point, because it's things to look for. You'll see it more on the defense than on the offense.
Any other questions, folks? Brian, can you take the tackle thing, please? Brian Bell?
Yep, I'm good. Okay, so the tackle protocol for referees, that hasn't changed. Tackler, assist tackler should be number 1. 2 is tackle player. 3 is arriving player. I think if I were to add anything to that, it would just be, we have to get there. In a good high-level game, you're going to get 160 tackles a game on average, and your presence makes the decisions of the other players alter somewhat if we're there. So tackler is defined as a player who makes a tackle, and in the action, the tackle goes to ground. So we want to make sure that there has been a tackle, someone has been brought to ground, and you must ensure that the tackler does their job first, make sure that they release the tackle player. If they don't, and you see a lot at the higher level, the players are getting really better and better at it all the time, using the player on the ground to spin off. So make sure we're aware of that. Then even though they're not technically holding on to them, they're not getting to their feet and going back in. New laws will be in play this year. After getting up, the tackler can only play from their side of the tackle. So there's a gate now. So you got to make sure that the tackler gets up, goes back to their defensive side before they re-enter. If not, it's liable to sanction as a penalty kick. A tackler ends up on their side of the tackle, it has to roll away immediately. So previously, a tackler could get up and play the ball from anywhere, and that's now been eliminated. So be aware of that, because there will be a lot of players who aren't aware of that, and hopefully we can address it. It didn't have a lot of issues with it in the fall last year, but there were some teams that still, with really aggressive jackals, they had to be reminded.
Quick question around that one.
Yeah, sure.
How do they get to their gate? Do they have to run round to kind of create a gate, or can they step over the player? What about like studs and boots hitting people in faces as they step over the player to get into that gate?
Well, hopefully that doesn't happen. What the tackler, the onus is on the tackler now to be entering from their defensive side. So they can't be on the offensive side. They can't be at the side, which previously they could be. So you're just looking at, if you see something that you don't like when the tackler is going through, then you make a judgment call. But you have to remind the tacklers that the only way they can participate once they made a tackle is by coming through from their defensive side. And we didn't have a huge amount of issues with it in the fall with university. You may have it a little bit with some at the club level, but again, it's just communication, and remind the tacklers what they have to do. They'll get it. So just unplayables should be rare anyways. Zero tolerance on the tacklers who slow up the ball and stop the attacking team from gaining quick possession. There's no change there. Just be diligent on the tacklers. There must be a clear release. They must be making an attempt to get out of the tackle zone. Players who assist in making a tackle or remain on their feet and do not go to ground, they, again, clearly release the tackle player and ball before they go back in to play the ball. You just want to make sure that you see a clear release from the tackler. The tackle player must not position their body to delay the release of the ball when isolated under pressure. We've used this for years anyways. For us, it's age grade under 18, no squeeze ball. But if guys are going to do that, just remind them the ball's got to be available immediately, or it's a penalty kick. Arriving players, nothing has really changed there. It's just they must do so from the direction of their own goal line. And referees should decide tackle entry based on how the arriving player enters, not how they exit. So that's just when someone comes from depth and they've clean out on sight. The angle is acceptable as long as it's not clearly from the side, because you're not always going to have somebody directly running east-west. You might have somebody on a slight angle. And again, that has a lot to do with this circumstance at the time. Just be aware of where they're coming from, and was it, if there was, did they remove a threat from the side? Everything else is the same. A player supporting the ball carrier, who then goes to ground with the ball carrier following a tackle, must roll away or get to their feet and be supporting their weight. The big point there is supporting their own weight, and that's a decision that you have to make and be consistent on. So guys cannot stay on top of the ball, and it's not only often with hands on the ground, but it's also forearms on the ground. You go across and sweep back. Those of you that watched Six Nations this year, you saw the next one with the post the driving out at the tackle. They were focusing on that a lot with the 1 meter width either side of the ball, and you saw maybe 8 or 9 calls where they called players. They used to get away with it before, coming in and taking out players that were outside of the ruck. So the 1 meter, and that doesn't have to necessarily be somebody who's involved, but even if they're standing there and somebody takes them out, it's liable to penalty. That's an obstruction call, and if they're on the fringes and they're taken out, they don't have the option to be involved in the tackle or the ruck. The jackal may keep contesting for the ball even if a ruck was already formed or forms around them, and that hasn't changed much, except that I think a lot of times coaches and players don't necessarily understand that law. If the jackal's in there first, they have every right to the ball, and then we as referees have a decision to make. And it explains, they have 1 shot at the ball. They don't get to keep trying for it. Keep in mind it's a 50-50. If the tackled player is trying to get the ball back and the jackal doesn't get it, then we play on. And again, for the holding on or arriving jackal, to be in a position of strength. Again, I just mentioned about no hands or elbows. You see a lot where guys go off and either on their hands or their forearms are on the ground. They're no longer supporting their body weight. They cannot now sweep back and attempt to lift the ball back.
Hey, Brian, just a quick question. Just on the previous point, this jackal, the first arriving player,
yep,
he's there, even if a ruck was already formed. So you've got a ruck that's already formed between 2 players, and so the jackal can come in and then contest the ball.
So Mike will speak to that, but yes, with the new law, with 1 man over the ball, it's considered a ruck.
Oh, okay, the 1-man ruck. Okay,
right. But when the arriving player comes in, if they choose not to make contact with that player and go for the ball, it's legal. After that, it becomes a ruck.
It makes sense with a 1-man ruck.
Yes. Okay. Yes. That's the only time you're going to have it, where it has to be the arriving player from the defense choosing not to engage with the player who's over the ball, but going for the ball first.
Yep, got it.
Okay, survive the clean out there on the bottom. Just again, we our focus about safety, because we get everybody trying to do gator rolls and everything else. If that's the case, everything has to be below the shoulders. If you see anything on the head or neck, you call it immediately and remind the players it's got to be on the torso. Good.
Hey, Mike. Ruck.
All right. Pretty simple because Brian did most of my job for me there, but ruck formation. 1 player over top of the ball on their feet now constitutes a ruck. That's coming from either side. Typically, your defender is probably going to play the ball if they're the first arriving player. The only point I wanted to make is that arriving player makes the offside line. So once that offside line's in, that eliminates England looking silly. There's no longer the tackle-only call, so you don't have to worry about that. And just to reemphasize Brian's point there about the defensive player still having rights to the ball when they arrive in a 1-man ruck, typically the only time you're going to see a jackal situation occurring is when that ball is still in a forward position where they can play it. So as referees, we just have to be mindful of that defensive player coming in. Can they actually play the ball? Because more than likely, if the ball is beyond their area where they can play it, they're probably going to go off their feet. So that's about all we have to be mindful of. The rest of it, the ruck's pretty simple. Just to be mindful of our pillars, our 1s, 2s, A's, B's, whatever you want to call them on the side. The guys setting the defensive line, that they're not extending over beyond the line, but putting their hand down. Use it straightforward. Everyone knows when the ball is out, because I'm sure everyone has to reemphasize that almost every Saturday because somebody's forgotten. Important thing, that we have to continue to do this year is protecting our scrum halves. So as they're digging out the ball, they can't be touched, they can't be hit, they can't be pulled in, right? They have a right to dig out that ball, and they have the right to play that ball. So we have to keep an eye on that. Yeah, so just remember that's pretty much a zero tolerance. Like, it's in the document as zero tolerance, and that's often what occurs. We have to make sure there's no late hits in the scrum half or targeting of the scrum half in any way. If a ruck collapses, you know, we had a good contest over the ball and then it's collapsed, but the ball hasn't come free of the bodies, let the 9 play it. We don't need to have people piling in on top of that situation. So although the ruck has collapsed in this situation without any foul play of any kind, let the 9 play the ball, hold the defense off until the 9 plays the ball in the center. Fair enough. We could go through the rationale for emphasis, but it's pretty straightforward. Mainly it's just to expedite the game a little bit is what they're doing here. So, any questions on that?
Mike, you're going to handle side and general play as well.
Yeah, no, I was just waiting here because I could see Dale's thrown something in here. I'm just reading it here.
Oh, heavens.
Yeah, so as Dale put it, the ball can be on the ground and the person can be over top without there being an offside line, so without a tackle. I like how you emphasized ankle tap, Dale, because some books describe that as a tackle, but we all know that's not a wrapped and brought to ground. So just a reminder that there will be some odd situations. Collapsed ruck, just to acknowledge Pletch there. Pletch, basically on a collapsed ruck. So we've seen a contest, and when we talk about a collapsed ruck in this scenario, we're talking about, you know, players contesting and just the power. You know, there's no real clear winner. It just kind of goes sideways or goes to the ground. And the whole reason the ball hasn't come out is because of that contest. But eventually, once it's on the ground, it is in a playable position. Allow the 9 to play it. Although I know you probably love scrummaging, we want to speed the game up and get it moving. So if they can play the ball, we're going to, you know, facilitate that happening rather than resetting with a scrum for an unplayable ball. And then just to answer, and then just to address quote unquote Dustin, aka Nathan's example here, with boosters at restarts going straight to ground without being tackled. There is no ruck, even though their support players may go over top of them. Good point. Anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah. So what happens there then if they go to ground and their support players are over top of them, and the defense comes into contest? What, you know, do you just play on? Is it obstruction? What is the call there?
Do you want to jump in, Nathan, and give the explanation?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily a question of what's the call. The question is, can we play on, right? So I think it's Matt who asked the question. If you can, you know, communicate again, no ruck, and then if the question comes at the next stoppage, then maybe, you know, find a way to explain it or a time to explain it. But if we can find a way to play on, if you can avoid calling anything, then that's great. Otherwise, I mean, calling an accidental obstruction would probably be where you would go if you can't get the ball to move in some way, and then just, you know, have that turnover happen there for the opposition. But, you know, it's just it's not a situation that arises very much. And here's the thing: if you don't say anything and the attacking team gets the ball off and the defending team is lined up on defense as though it was a ruck, then great. Let's just don't say anything, play on. Then you don't put yourself in a situation where you have to manage something. It's when referees say something when they don't need to, and then all of a sudden the question happens or the situation happens, and then you have to address it. So if you don't have to say anything and everyone plays on as if it's a ruck and there's an offside line, then great. But if a defender recognizes it and then they come around to play the ball from the back, then happy days.
Happy with that?
Yeah, that sounds good. There's no penalty, no illegal action there then. That was my question basically.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for jumping on that, Nathan.
Can somebody write up something after this to summarize the discussion that's just been had, just so that we can have it for our edification and.
So just to clarify for everyone, you'll see that flashing red light in the bottom. This whole session is being recorded. So after we're done the meeting, we will take the file and chop it up. So we can go back through and re-emphasize these points if you want us to. It's not a problem.
So this will be available for our viewing later.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yep, not a problem.
Hey, Michael, do you mind if I chip in on one more piece around that one-man tackle, or sorry, one-man ruck?
Yeah, please.
Just in terms of that first defending arriver, even though there's an attacking support player over the ball and the offside line has been created, we're still allowing that defender to contest for the ball if they get their hands on it before they make contact with that first arriving attack player, which is a bit weird because you wouldn't actually see that in a game. Because if I'm the first attacking arriver and I get there in plenty of time before a defender comes in, as soon as I see that a defender going for the ball, I'm probably going to effectuate a clean out of some kind. So what they're really trying to get to is that situation where there is basically a tie. What we want to do is allow for that contest to happen. It's kind of like in baseball where we say tie goes to the runner. We're going to say tie goes to the defender. We're going to let them continue to contest the ball. That's really why that clarification came out. Because if you have one person standing over the ball as the attacker and you go 1,000, 2,000, and the defender comes, they probably wouldn't get their hands on the ball before that attacking player decides to make it clean out anyways, okay? So I think it's the point of that tie goes to the defender, allow that contest to happen, as opposed to saying, which we've heard in the past, quote unquote, beaten by the ruck. There's no such thing as beaten by the ruck. You're only beaten by the ruck if there was contact before, over the ball before the defender went to go and play the ball, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, Nathan, that's a great point. Also, at most of the levels we're going to be doing, guys are not going to be going in and get at the ball first before there's some type of battle over the ball, and that's what they want. I think that those guys that didn't would quickly be subbed off the field anyhow.
Yeah.
So we're all good with that? Perfect. Thanks, Nathan, for just adding a little more to that. Oh, we got another question. If the defender has a chance at all, the defender has a right. So I think just from the explanation and clarification from Nathan as well, the defender is going to go for the ball if they have a chance at the ball. And if they do have a chance at the ball, then they do have a right to it. So that answers your question, David, I hope. I'll just quickly summarize because I'm covering for John Weller now, I think, on the offside as well. Read the law book. Offside and general play. The guidelines in this are basically just re-emphasizing the law book, where the ball's kicked in general play, if you're in front of the kicker, you're offside, so on and so forth. Basically, where we need to keep our focus is cutting down on those players advancing who are in an offside position. We can manage that by communicating to them to stop moving forward or telling them to move back. And the whole reason behind that, obviously, is that they're killing any attacking opportunity for the team receiving the kick or returning a kick. You got to deal with them even though it's going to look like it goes into touch, because also they do have the option for the quick line out. And if they're in that area, they're going to kill that opportunity for the attacking team, and they're still in an offside position, right? So just got to keep an eye on that, 10-meter law, all that fun stuff. So I hope nobody has questions on offside and open play. Hearing none, I think we can move on to the quick throw and line out, which I believe I saw Rebecca join us.
Hey guys, how's it going? Can you all hear me?
We're all on mute, Rebecca.
You're good. We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear
Okay,
you.
fantastic. Oh, great. Okay, so in regards to quick throw and line out, the first point here is just in regards to the 22-meter line. So when the offense brings that ball over that 22-meter line, as soon as that ball has been touched by an opposing player, there's a tackle that happens, a ruck, scrum, maul, or line out is formed, then that offensive team now has the ability to kick directly into touch and gain ground. Now, when that ball is considered to have been taken back into the 22-meter area, it would be when that offensive team basically wins the ball, brings it back over the line, and they go for that kick. It's going to be directly into touch. I think we're all pretty familiar with that one. So next point is going to be knock on or throw forward into touch. So this is when a player knocks that ball on or throws that ball forward into touch without going off of a player. We do have that choice. So either a scrum at the place where the knock on has taken place, or we can have a line out there. Okay, now if a team does decide to quick throw, then you can allow that, and that is them taking the choice. So don't like stop the team from taking that choice of the quick line out just to ask them. Clearly, if they're going for a quick line out, they've chosen to do the line out, so allow rugby to happen there. Next, we have quick throws. So in regards to quick throws, that may be taken from the place at which the ball went out, or anywhere from that point all the way to that team's own goal line. So that quick throw can be thrown straight or a bit backwards. That's fine, as long as that ball travels across the 5-meter line before it touches a player or the ground. So as soon as that player as soon as a player has touched that ball, if it's not 5, then we can deal with free kicks, etc. from that point. Now, the player who ended up over the touchline must give the ball to the opposition and must not throw the ball away as such to prevent that quick throw. That would be considered a penalty kick at the 15-meter line in front of that point where the ball went into touch. Now, if a player standing within 5 meters of the touchline attempted to block a quick throw, that can also be managed, but these players aren't allowed, obviously, to block that from traveling 5 meters either. So that would be a free kick at that 15-meter line if they were preventing that ball from either traveling 5 meters or blocking that quick throw. If anyone has questions, please jump in or stop me. I think this is all fairly basic for most people. Numbers and line-out players. So in regards to the focus and what some teams will forget to do, especially at the lower levels, is to put a player opposite of that thrower. So we'll need a receiver that is set 2 meters back, and then also that hooker position as well to be filled, just so that we have an opposing player there. So you may just need to manage and remind some of the younger players that they will need somebody there. I think that mostly covers that section. In regards to the formation of a line-out, you will need 2 players from each team, so minimum of 4 players in order to create a line-out. For the U16s and above, the front support player of the line-out may lift on the thighs, and then we talk a little bit about age grade as well. That is just lifting from the shorts. That's just more of a safety thing. With line-out management, so next section here, the throwing team must not delay the formation of a line-out. So one thing that we started to see last season was a little bit of a huddle from that offensive team before they went into the line of touch. So just preventing that from being a long-term thing, because that's going to prevent the defensive team from knowing how many numbers they need to set in that line out. So we need to give the defensive team a reasonable opportunity to match numbers. So stacking is the next point here, which is legal as long as that jumper is grounded. So if that jumper is still in the air, then that would be a penalty kick. So no stacking of the lifters either. So that needs to be definitely managed, and that can be a bit of a timing thing. As long as the jumper's feet are on the ground, then that stack, otherwise known as a pancake, is good. Now, next point here, referees should penalize the defending lineout that drives in on the jumper and or support players while the jumper is off the ground. So that's that same point that I just mentioned about just penalty kick if that player is off of the ground. Teams deciding not to engage in the maul in lineout. So we saw this a little bit throughout last season, just as a tactical strategy in the lineouts is not engaging defensively in that lineout. So if the defenders back away and leave the lineout as a group, then that would be a penalty kick to the attacking team because those defenders can't leave that lineout. However, if the defenders choose not to engage by simply stepping to the side and opening up a gap to create space for the offensive team with the ball to go through, then that is perfectly okay. So the attacking team would need to have the ball at the front where the players are not obstructing the ball, so the defense has access to that ball carrier. Now, if by chance that ball did go to the back, then the suggestion is for the referee to say use it, and they must immediately do so. If that offensive team with the ball drives forward and does not immediately use the ball, then we should be awarding a scrum to the defending team for an accidental offside rather than a penalty kick for an obstruction. So does anyone have anything to add to that or any discussion points in regards to that disengagement from that maul at the lineout?
For me, that the last point there is very important. That becomes all about management. They have to be aware that when that happens, because keeping in mind the attacking team is anticipating a contest, and when they don't, make sure that you're aware of it right away and give them a little bit of time to use it, because it's a little bit different at professional levels and the levels that we are involved in. But they need to be aware of the, referees, we need to be aware of that happening, make sure we're on top of it right away. But that's a big management issue when that happens.
Absolutely. So Mike Fletch also had a point here, or a question rather, is how do you define leaving the line out? One step for sure to receive a penalty kick off of that would be a little bit harsh. I think as long as they're not completely like backing away and leaving the area completely before, I don't know, what is everyone's opinion on that first point about the penalty?
I would agree that a penalty might be harsh in most circumstances. Keep in mind, they get a meter to start with before the lineout's over.
Yeah.
So once that you've seen what's happening within that meter, you're managing it, voice it. If teams make a decision to use it or not use it, then you have a decision to make. Yeah, most of the teams, once that happens, they're aware that they've got to use it or be liable to penalty, and they do so, and usually it's just a play on.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dale's point's probably clearest. Let's just look at it as it's clear and obvious that they're stepping away and leaving the line out. Just to answer your follow-up there, Fletch, backing up isn't necessarily what's illegal. It's leaving the line out before the line out's over, because it's in the law, and you got to look at the spirit of what that law is trying to say. And the reason that they can't leave the line out is because somehow it's probably interpreted as an unfair advantage in some form.
Yeah, and I see that typically teams would be aware of whether or not they're going to defend them all or not defend them all. So if they're leaving, like Dale said, in a clear and obvious way early before that lineout has completed and backing away and not giving an opportunity for that lineout to finish, then I think that's more what that law is talking about.
And also, guys, keep in mind, more often than not, teams that do that will advise you pregame. They'll come up to you and discuss it, so you're aware of it, so you know it's going to happen at some point, and you can be proactive right away.
Just a quick question. It goes straight to a penalty kick, but I assume we would play a advantage to start with first, correct?
Yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't.
Assuming that the attacking team...
I think our job as a referee is to encourage continuity, so I would always take an opportunity to play advantage if I could.
Absolutely.
Rebecca, it's Nathan. Can I chip in for just 1 second?
Please,
I would just make 2 points. The first is that, as Brian said, some teams will come up to you prior to a game and explain that this is something that they might try, but they might not. And I think what as referees we need to be aware of is we need to have it now as part of our checklist going into the lineout, that it's something I need to be prepared for, because where we get caught out is when we get caught by surprise by the action just as much as the team that wins the lineout ball. So I think that's one of the things we need to add to our toolkit, is just that checklist piece, that lineout. So okay, just remember that if the defending team doesn't contest, here's what it looks like. And the second piece is just as Jeff just mentioned, is that we are here to try and look for continuity. So I think we need to be proactive as opposed to waiting to see what happens and then making a decision. I think our better option is to identify what happens very quickly, to say, okay, this is what I should be seeing. How can I help these teams get through this? Is it no maul? Is it lineouts over? Is it that player can come around and tackle? Like, however we decide we're going to communicate now, give them an opportunity to figure out that they need to do something with the ball, or that the defending team is liable to be penalized, or something along those lines, right? How can we be proactive, I think, is the next step we need to take.
So, yeah, I'm not sure if anybody can hear me, but do you mind if I just add a point? Sorry, it's Dale talking. Can I just add a point as to how to manage the stepping off of the line? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Can everybody hear me okay?
Go ahead, Dale.
Okay.
Yes,
right.
Dale. Sure.
So one thing I would add is yes, we can play advantage if we want, if a team leaves the line out early. But one thing that I would do if I'm going into a NRU game or a Marshall game, whatever game I'm going into, if I see this happen early on in the game, I'm probably going to blow it up. And then at the ensuing downtime, so probably at the next line out, I'm going to blow time off, and I'm going to just clarify what happened there, because the team that got penalized probably won't know why they got penalized. So just add some clarity to it and let them know that they can't step off. And then from there, if they continue to step off, then go ahead and play advantage. There's no right or wrong there. That's just what I would have done and I would do personally.
For me, that's why I think the scrum option is way better, so you don't have to stop the game twice. And not to disagree with what you're suggesting, but Dale, if you call a scrum, you can, at the scrum, you have time to talk to the 16 forwards and say, okay, guys, next line out, this is what I need to happen. And hopefully you don't make too many stoppages in the game for chatter, because based on the level of play that you're refereeing, you may or may not get compliance anyway. And also depending on how a previous referee has called it the week before. So for that particular time, I would use that downtime at the scrum to say, okay, guys, this is what needs to happen. Next time could be liable to a penalty kick. And hopefully that clears the situation up.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions from that section at all?
Rebecca, Clive, just one last question. So none of this has changed from previous years. We're just making it very clear around what our actions should be, correct?
Yeah, it's just come up a lot more, I believe. So it's just clarifying the laws that are already there.
Hey, Red, I had a question with regard to the team not engaging in the attacking team maul. I've had it where I've seen this many times and have been coached on it at Western. And what I've seen is now teams know that, you know, if you have a smart defensive team, they're not going to engage. And there's players who, on the attacking maul, will try and grab players into that maul, because once obviously one player engages, then it's considered a fair contest between both teams that have created an appropriate maul. I was wondering what what the appropriate sanction on that is, or if anyone has experienced that. I've experienced that, where you just sort of get dragged into a maul, and then before you know it, your whole call to not engage sort of goes to the wayside.
So for me, John, that's a penalty to the attacking team pulling players in, because you have to be a willing participant to engage to compete for the ball. If you see that, you call a penalty right away, and then you talk to that player, and ideally within the earshot of the captain as well, saying you cannot pull players in to simulate a competition for the ball.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
John,
I guess.
John, I would have to agree with Brian there for sure. Like, in terms of pulling a player in, it does have to be a willing engagement by that defending team.
Okay, we are moving into the maul section with that question. So, any other questions of Rebecca? Quick throw and line out. Okay, Eric, can you lead the maul charge?
Yeah, getting there.
Okay.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Okay, sorry, my things are acting up here. Okay, the mall looks like there's not too many changes for the new year, so I'm just going to go through the points real quick. I'm sure most of you have already read this. Once again, the ball can only be moved backwards, hand to hand, once the maul has formed, and there's no more there. You cannot slide to the back of the maul if you are in contact with it. Second point, same thing. Ball can be moved backwards, hand to hand, once the maul has been formed, and the ripper must stay in contact with the jumper until the ball is transferred. You can no longer do like a long transfer to the back, hand it to one of your buddies at the back of the maul. There'd be an obstruction call there. Hello? Okay. Next, in the attack, when the maul is formed at a line or line after a kick, our defenders must have access to the ball. And if there are obviously if there's players in front of the ball, then there will be an obstruction call. Attacking players have to join from behind or alongside the hindmost foot to the teammate, and they must not join in front of the player, otherwise you're going to get an obstruction call. Detachment from the maul behind the leading player, if it becomes attached and behind the player. Wait a second here, just lost myself. Players detaching from the maul, you guys can read it. It's pretty much straightforward. If they detach and then rejoin, we get what you call the truck and trailer. Let's move on. Stuff is very, very clear if you just read it through. Players in the bound on the side may not slide forward or swim around the maul. If they're not remaining bound, they're not cut up the maul. They're in an offside position, so they just can't slide up them. They have to slide up the maul. They have to join from hindmost foot. Players join the maul legally and are either caught up in the maul. This is so much easier just to read it. The maul have remained bound, are legally entitled to be in the maul and contest the ball carrier. The referee should not call out such players even though they may appear to be on the wrong side. If the defending players choose to unbind, they cannot obstruct anybody. On the next level here, the team in possession may continue to drive forward, and the opposing players must re-enter the maul from the hindmost foot. This should be managed by, when you see someone out of a maul, tell them to get the hell out. Unplayable and collapsed mauls, sideways is stationary. What else is here? The maul becomes unplayable. If the ball becomes unplayable to maul, the referee orders a scrum with a throw into the team that was not in position when the maul began. All right, that's pretty straightforward. If the ball carrier in a maul, nothing's really changed here. If the ball player in a maul goes to ground and it's possible to make the ball available, the ball carrier must do so as quickly as possible. This includes releasing the ball to an opponent on their feet. The opponent does not have to release the ball carrier on the ball when the maul goes to ground. All right. Yeah, a lot of players complain about this, but you can hold on as long as possible until you get to the ground, and then it ends up being a what do you call it? Scrum awarded to the opposing team.
I think the key point there is that a maul does not become a tackle if it goes to ground.
Yeah, you hear a lot of players. I hear a lot of players complaining about that. Well, he has to release me, and they do not have to release. They can hold you right till you get to the ground and prevent the ball from coming out. Finally, if the ball carrier is in a maul that goes to ground and it is impossible for the ball carrier to make the ball available immediately, the referee should award a scrum with the throw into the team that was not in possession. And then finally, at the maul, if there's a chance to play the ball after the maul has gone to ground, and the referee sees that, they should be calling the use it call to keep the ball in play, to keep things going. The team possession has 5 seconds. Usually they play it quicker than that anyway, if you tell them to use it. And that's it. Sorry, I went through that pretty quick, but there's really no changes to any of the laws. Any questions?
Okay, Jeff, can you deal with restarts and kicks and advantage, please?
Yeah, so again, as Eric said, the language here is pretty self-evident, and I have to go back to a point that Nathan has made previously in the last comments that he made, that these points are all well and good, but they call into question what the management cues are around these points on restarts and kicks, and how do we set ourselves up as referees to for success and to encourage continuity. So, for example, the question, zero tolerance on the ball being thrown away or preventing a free kick or penalty kick, that's fine. We as referees have to anticipate these situations before they happen, and either manage our way through them or manage them afterwards. So, for example, at a minimum, zero tolerance on the ball being thrown away after to prevent a free kick. That was obviously be a penalty, we should let the players know what our expectations are early on in order to avoid that situation from happening again, minimize the number of whistles and stoppages in play that are going to occur during the game. So there would be at a minimum a penalty and an admonishment in that situation. Beware of the players milking an extra 10 meters and playing on in that situation. Well, how do we prevent that happening again later in the game? Use your downtime off the ball. Take a number. Talk to the player afterwards. Make it known to all the players that you're not going to accept that. State your expectations. So those are the important points with respect to restarts and kicks. Anybody have anything to add to that? No, we can move on to the shortest law in the book.
All right, I have one quick question. What is it's just play on there, right? They run into a retreating player, not trying to play the not trying to make a tackle, just play on, right?
It's cynical play. Yeah, it's play on. It's cynical play, but we want to obviously nip that one in the bud, manage it. Nip that one in the bud. At the next stoppage in play, have a word with the player, have a loud word with the player so everybody hears it. You're not going to stand for that kind of behavior.
I have a quick question in regards to kicking and the ruck. I haven't seen this anywhere in the game management guidelines. Maybe I missed it, but you're not allowed to kick the ball in a ruck anymore. That's an automatic penalty, is it not now, or a free kick?
Kick the ball out of a ruck?
You can't kick the ball through a ruck, yes.
That's always been in the law book as far as I know.
No, it's now a penalty. You cannot kick the ball out of a ruck.
Yeah, that was new this past season, right? I think that was one of the things that we were told.
So just to clarify, guys, these are management guidelines. These are not updates on the law variations. Okay. So
I'll just double check. Okay.
They just address concerns or trends that have been seen and how to manage them. So clearly that has not been an issue in Australia at this point.
Advantage? So key points here are that advantage can be tactical or territorial, or tactical, I guess. So that putting the emphasis on tactical. So unfortunately, if you go into the laws of the game section on the IRB or World Rugby website, there's a few videos there of in the advantage section. The fourth video shows a situation of tactical advantage accruing when there's been no gain in ground. So it's important if the attacking side with advantage has an opportunity, a tactical opportunity to gain ground, but doesn't exploit it, then that is still advantage accrued. Does that everyone get that point? In other words, if you pass the ball down the line 4 times and have an opportunity to make an attacking thrust but aren't able to exploit it, that's still advantage accruing. And that's the specific point being made in that fourth video if you go to the laws of the game site. Other key points with respect to advantage, there's you might want to play advantage differently between a penalty advantage and a technical advantage. You might want to play advantage differently depending on point where you are on the pitch. Probably, for example, inside the 22 attacking side, you probably want to give the attacking side an opportunity to score and play a longer advantage than you might want to play anywhere else on the pitch. And just to raise a question for discussion here, can anyone think of how advantage might be played differently under the new variations, specifically the ruck variation? Anybody want to weigh in there? No? One-man ruck? That's basically eliminated as somebody made an earlier chat comment. Brian made a chat comment. Poor Italy. That's kind of sort of eliminated that situation, and gives rise to, in my opinion, gives rise to an advantage situation in a one-man ruck, whereas there would have been no offense and no advantage played previously. But anyway,
any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, do you want to look after foul play? Mike, you there?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, it just took a while for it to let me talk. Maybe it's somebody trying to send me a message. Really simple foul play. Emphasis again, this is following. You're always going to see it every year. Our focus on tackles. We have the new tackle protocol that's come out. Contact point is really deciding. Like, you got your appropriate sanctions decided. Starts the contact point. So we're going below the shoulder. Going below the shoulder. Basic. Below the armpits is probably your best bet. Along that plane, everything below that. So where does it start? Where does it finish? What was the contact made with? Was it the arm, the hand, the shoulder? Action, was it accidental, reckless, deliberate, and degree of force? So it's about carrying through, or especially when you're looking at any hit to the head or neck, are we seeing force applied to the head or neck, right? So that will determine your sanction between penalty kick, yellow card, or red card. All this stuff is up. You can see examples of it on World Rugby's website. Basically, repeated deliberate infringements. So we're talking about cynical here. Number of different offenses, short period of time, same team or player. You could go to the pocket. Similar offenses without a time limit. They continue to go off their feet all game. Eventually, got a clamp on it, or just the same individual, right? So penalty kicks, yellow card. If it's cynical, you're probably looking at yellow. But again, this is where management comes in. You can often just have that chat, bring things back down. Another area of focus is the neck rolls. So guys going for that clear out, are they grabbing the neck? If they're grabbing the neck at all, you're still going to start at penalty because they're still making contact at the neck. If they roll the player to the ground, you're likely looking at a yellow card if they're doing it on the neck. And anything you see with extreme force or dumping action, you're going to be looking at a red. All right. Challenges in the air. And we now have guidelines on these situations that came out from World Rugby, which they're addressing here. You got to look at how fair the challenge is, right? If both players are going up, they're both contesting the ball, great. That's just play on. Obviously, if the timing's wrong, but they're not pulling it down, it's not really a fair challenge. You're looking at least at a penalty. Any pull down with the player landing on their back or side is a yellow card. Red card is anything going beyond that 90-degree plane. Important thing to note as well that you might want to take some time to think about is if that player is in the process of turning and they stick their arm out to prevent themselves from turning, that's the player being tackled, taking action to prevent them from turning, but they have in fact been turned. And actually, if you do go through the bowels of World Rugby, they do actually look at that as still being a red card, right? So we are still looking to see the actions of the tackling player, where they're taking that player to. The only other thing really that needs to be emphasized in here, the binds coming into mauls or rucks. We're seeing a lot of players coming in and dropping shoulders to try and do counter rucks or entering with their shoulder. We have to be wary of that and manage it. Yeah, pretty much straightforward. We don't have blue cards, so we don't have to worry about that. Players milking penalties, just give them the Wayne Barnes approach. I don't think I really need to go into the touchline trials. Again, that's a variation you can see online. So, and all the other changes in law for variations this year, everything is on World Rugby, and they do have good video now. I don't know if Nathan's planning on redoing his nice seminar again, but that could also be something that comes up. So, any questions in terms of foul play?
Okay, Paul, do you want to fish it off with the other?
Can I have a really quick question about, it's not so much blue cards, we don't have blue card, but we just use our own discretion. We've got a player that somebody says so I had an issue last year where somebody shouted to me that he's got blood, is going to go off for blood. So I said okay, because he was quite away from me. And then the play came back down, I'm running back down the pitch, and I go past them, and I happen to see there's absolutely no blood at all. So at the next kind of breakdown, I stopped the game, came back, and the guy was just off taking a drink and a bit of a break. There was no blood at all. I just talked to him about that. What should I do in those situations?
My suggestion there, Clive, would be that you've now been subbed out. You're not able to continue. But if you stop the game for blood, you actually have the final decision before it goes off to the therapist, unless the therapist is called onto the field. So if players are trying to do that, which is a rare circumstance, but so be it, you just tell that player, no, if you've gone off the field and it's not for blood, you can't re-enter. Simple. Move on.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to add to that. I've seen in circumstances where like the blood has been sort of cleaned up, and I've actually had that sometimes where I've seen players go off for blood, and then it been cleaned up and it looked like actually nothing had happened. So sometimes you really have to be almost 100% sure that that player did maybe cynically go off just to get a break, and not that the blood was actually just cleaned up really fast or something like that.
Well, bottom line is, guys, bottom line is we have to make the final decision on everything that occurs on the field. So nobody should be calling out blood and you just wave, yeah, okay, go ahead, go off. You want to inspect it. If you don't think it's worthy of a blood substitution, then don't allow it. Or if that person goes off the field on their own, again, without you calling for a blood sub, that player cannot re-enter, period.
So, Brian, if that player goes off on their own and they're only playing with 14 aside, he can come back on.
No, yeah, we're just talking about if it's for blood.
Yeah, if the guy comes on and subs the blood off, then you're right, that guy's off.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just, I guess, bottom line is we should be involved in all decisions that involve the 30 players on the field before something happens. So you do your due diligence, inspect it, then you make your decision, and don't allow people to just run off randomly.
Okay, Paul.
Nathan, were you going to say something there?
No, I mean, we addressed the big issue. The only thing I don't want anyone to feel, though, is that it has to be a referee issue. So to answer Clive, from the perspective of what you should do is listen, at the end of the day, your one job is player welfare. Your most important job is player welfare. So if he's coming off to take a quote unquote a break in a game that has no unlimited subs or anything like that, and it's because there's a concern about a head injury, then you just put it right back onto the team and say, listen, it's everyone's responsibility to be honest here about what this player is dealing with. If there's a potential head injury, then he's done for the game. It's simple as that. It's not a referee problem. It's something that everyone has to be responsible for. So don't feel like you're taking away someone's opportunity by insisting on some of these things. Like that's just the reality of where the game's at nowadays, and players and coaches and medical staff all need to be held just as accountable for that as referees. So it's not a refereeing issue. It's a team and player issue as well as referees. You know what I mean?
Thank you for that, Nathan. Actually, that was pretty much the point I was going to end my whole session there on, just to answer Clive's thing in regards, especially with head injuries. We need to be aware as well. It's on us as referees as much as it is on the players and the coaches. So if you don't think someone should continue, feel free to make that call. You are the sole judge of fact and law. And ultimately, if something does happen from a legal standpoint, thinking legally or ethically, there, we carry a pretty weighty position. So protect yourself out there, and know that we as a society are behind you on those decisions.
Okay, Paul.
All right, so to wrap this up, a couple quick things on touch. So what they've done is with touch, line of touch, 22, in goal, dead ball, they basically redefined what constitutes crossing the line now. The old days used to matter if the ball was rolling, not rolling. None of that matters anymore. It's now about the plane. So if you got the winger with 1 foot in touch catches the ball, that the ball is still hasn't crossed the plane, then the winger has taken it into touch. Same with the 22, same with in goal, and same with dead ball. So if it's, somebody can't call a mark with 1 foot in the 22 and, the other foot on the other side, the ball's got to cross the plane. So now what we will allow, though, if the ball, if the ball is going out and the player jumps from the field of play and throws the ball back in before landing, then we're going to play on. I like to use the did it look awesome? If it looked awesome, we're probably going to let it go method on that one. So what we just covered, who has taken it into touch, it's now about the ball crossing the plane. So the ball hasn't crossed if the ball has crossed the plane, then it was the kicking team, or if it hasn't crossed, then it's the catching team, I guess. All right, and a couple other minor things. Tactically replaced player may come back on the field to replace a player who's been injured as a result of foul play. Of course, like it says here, if it happens early on, it may not have any effect on the game, but if it's near the end, a tactical sub can come back on. And then a couple things on time management. So if a try is scored near the end of time, the deciding factor whether or not you'll have a restart is when the foot hits the ball on the kick. So if there's still time left when the foot hits the ball, then we'll have a restart. If there's not, then we won't. If you get a scrum or a line out, or a restart for that matter, which has been awarded before time is up, then the game's not over until that has successfully ended. So that means if you have scrum collapses, you bring them back up. If the lineout's not taken properly, then you have the result from that. And a penalty kick, you can have the lineout now. If you penalty awarded after time is up and you want to go for the line, you can kick it into touch and we'll have a lineout. Intentional knock-ons, which they're seeing a lot of focus on now if you watch a lot of professional rugby. Generally, when it's an intentional, when it's not intentional. If there's clearly a guy trying to make a catch, then it's a knock-on. Clearly he's just killing a line break, then it's a minimum of penalty. And then you look at, what would have happened next. Is it a line break, or, you're under serious trouble and they just slap the ball down, then it's a yellow card. And again, if you're the last defender and the ball is going to beat you and then you're 5 meters out, then it's a penalty try and a yellow card. 90 seconds has been around for a couple of years. If the scoring team throws the ball away, their 90 seconds has started. They're just going to have to hurry. And then these last few bits are basically about time management. Just remember what we just talked about, that player welfare and player safety is our main focus on this. So if there's a serious injury, time off, let it be dealt with. But if it's the winger getting stretched out on the far side of the field, we're going to play on. I think that's about it. Any questions? I'm looking at June. Are we covering the new law trials for high school? I don't know.
Michael?
I believe we would be, because they all came into play as of August of last year. So for high school, all of the new laws should be in play.
And what Brian pointed out, one of the big things for the intentional knock-on is, you know, if they slap the ball down, clearly that's no attempt to catch. If they slap it up and chase it, then, you know, a lot of times it's one of those things you'll know it when you see it. If if there's even a debate, then you just have to make the decision.
More pertinent to June's question there, I think that we've been having a lot of good discussion tonight around the game management guidelines, a lot of clarification, and I don't think we want to drag this out too long. So we may have to look at doing some more with the time, the new law trials and that at a later date.
For high schools, you mean?
Yeah, for
So
high schools.
essentially, the new laws apply to high school the same as we've just discussed. And I don't know, Bob, did you want me to go through any more under 19 things?
I think nothing has really dramatically changed. As you said, all of the new guidelines apply to high school games. So, there haven't, otherwise than the changes made to the game, there haven't been changes made to the U19 laws. So they're the same as they have been. It probably, we're all familiar with them. So we probably really don't need to review them tonight. So is there any other comments? So first of all, I'd like to thank Nathan for sitting in on the call. We'll send out an email with links to the recording for this. So those that weren't able to attend tonight, we had a total of 21 people that attended. I see Johnny Ray from Windsor's on the line, and Stu Bailey and Witter from Sarnia was on the line. So it's good that they're able to be able to access this and not have to travel a great distances. So I hope the next meeting we have that we can have a few more people. Yes, Nathan, go ahead.
It's Eric. Just want to let people know. I think most of you know me anyway, but I am the appointer this year for the games. And April is coming. Exhibition stuff is coming. Most of you are registered from last year, but please be aware to get registered as soon as you can for the 2018 season. The NRU schedules, if you want to have a look, are up on the Rugby Ontario website. For those who are looking, the Marshall games are all up, so you can have a look for planning your summer and that kind of thing. We're going to talk more about this through email and stuff, but be aware that we're going to need lots of referees, and we're really, really happy to have all of you referee with us this year. And if you have dates planned and stuff, like if you're going to be in Windsor or you're going to be in Sarnia or places like that, okay, or Bruce County, maybe you're planning your summer out, let me know on some of those things. Have a look when games are taking place so that I can appoint you up to those areas. Just in case some of you are early planners, it'd be nice to know. That's it.
Bob, can I add one piece?
Go ahead. Yep.
Just to encourage all of our referees to try and make a point to get out to some club practice sessions so that you can pass along some of this information about laws and also raise your profile with local clubs.
Anybody else got comments? Okay, we have another session in 2 weeks, and that's a practical session on scrummaging. We've got some club coaches and players that are going to be involved. We're going to do it in 3 locations. So we want to see everybody out for that. Scrummaging is safety and technique. It's very important. Sometimes we as referees don't necessarily get it right. This is a real good opportunity to learn about how scrummages are formed and some of the things that are going on and problems and how you identify what's creating the problem. So I'll thank everyone for being on the line tonight. And if there's no other issues, I'll say good night.